Ladies and gentlemen, you thought you can only have one episode. They thought they could keep us away on No Filter Network, but that is not true. We're back. Your boys are back here on this Wednesday evening, 8 p.m. Eastern time here on in our neck of the woods. So happy to have everybody along here for tonight's episode of the Auto Racing Digest show. My name is Dylan Spalding. I am the site manager at Auto Racing Digest. Joined with my fellow co-host, if you will, by one of our site writers, covers IndyCar, covers a little bit of everything on our site, Mr. Liam Herbert, joining us here on tonight's show. Liam, welcome back, obviously, for week number 2. Exciting show we have tonight. A lot of news coming out this afternoon. It's funny, we were prepping for this yesterday, and it seemed like there wasn't a ton of news. Well, it just dropped everything today. It seemed like today was just kind of the unloading of just news and stories coming out. So a lot to get into, a lot of driver announcements, a lot of team announcements as the season is rapidly coming up here. I mean, dude, we're only a couple weeks away from January really becoming a realization here, and for us to kind of be realizing that the motorsport season, I mean, is on its way in terms of it coming back. I mean, obviously we had Formula E this weekend. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about the Formula One race that happened this weekend as well in Abu Dhabi. Obviously, this is a light time of year in terms of racing. Obviously, racing on track action, but there is a lot to talk about in terms of news stories to discuss. So I know we're going to get into a lot of things here tonight, but Liam, I'll begin with asking you, how was your weekend? Obviously, we got a little bit of a racing fix, but how was your weekend? And obviously, welcome back on to episode number 2.
Happy to be back. Absolutely. Good weekend because we had some racing happen. I do get very sad when there's nothing happening, and it's Formula E, which is a series that's very near and dear to my heart. It was kind of one of my gateways into getting into racing. So I always love to see it. I love to see the new changes in the series. Definitely a lot of news this week. I assume there's some people some PR people going on vacation this week. Which is probably why we got a lot of announcements today. Who knows? But definitely this is the time where it's like, okay, we got to pick our new CEO or whatever now because, we're going to be back in the swing of things in a month, before they go on break. So, yeah, great weekend. How was yours?
Pretty good, man. Just watching some Formula E racing, obviously. Got Formula One on Sunday. Getting some work done, couple interviews here. People who are wondering, next week we will not have a show. I am getting my wisdom teeth pulled out next week, so probably not the most glamorous thing to mention on a podcast. But hey, listen, it's real life stuff, and I want to be transparent with everybody as much as I possibly can in this process. So, life is life. Unfortunately, next week I will be out of action, but it was a good week, and looking forward to this weekend. We have a really light weekend in terms of racing track action. We'll get into some of that a little bit here as we wrap up the show later tonight. But again, a lot to dive into, a lot to digest here as we wrap up a very exciting opening race for Formula E in Sao Paulo. And I think that is probably where we will begin. Obviously, looking back at the weekend, Sao Paulo for Formula E, the season opener, and the season finale for Formula One at Abu Dhabi, and one of my more favorite tracks on this schedule for Formula One. But I guess let's begin with Formula E. What a wild and wacky race that was to kickstart the season. I really should have guessed based off of how the beginning of the race started, with Robin Freins not even starting the race, actually had to get pulled off the track, which delayed the start of the race. And then just things continued to, I don't want to say spiral, but I mean, that's kind of probably the best word to use in a sense for the way things ended up playing out. 2 red flag stoppages of the race, rolling start to after the first or second red flag. We had the side-by-side start after the first red flag. Lot to digest after the first weekend. I mean, I guess I'll just ask you, Liam, overall initial thoughts coming out of Sao Paulo and the round 1 of the Formula E season here.
Well, on one hand, I don't know what to think in the sense that I don't think we saw enough. I don't think there was enough reliability to give us a completely clear picture of what this season is going to look like, but it definitely showed a lot of really interesting things that definitely have changed, and it gets me really excited for Mexico and everything coming up in the new year. I would call it an awkward start. Clearly, they have some things to iron out with the new car, and some teams in particular. Jaguar obviously has some electrical problems to work out with their powertrain. Uh, there's going to be a lot of work happening in the next month and a half before the next race. That's for sure.
I think I'll ask you this: what are kind of your top three storylines you take away from this weekend in terms of just notables, if you will? I think there was a lot to digest, as you mentioned. There's a lot that I think we're going to learn about this racing that's coming up here in Formula E, especially this season where we're kind of entering this kind of new era, if you will, so to say, in Formula E. So I think what were kind of maybe your three takeaways, three storylines, if you will, coming out of Sao Paulo?
Absolutely. Easy peasy. Taylor Barnard is a very good driver, and he made a very good first impression in his first Formula E race. Attack mode uh, does work and actually does what it is supposed to do. So that's really cool, and I think very important that Formula E has finally ironed that out, because that was a little embarrassing there for a second the last couple of seasons, but glad to see it there now. The four wheel drive definitely really excites me. And the last thing I'll say, which is very surface level, but I think it's important, the cars look really good on track, and I really like the way that they have taken the aesthetic. Formula E, each generation has looked pretty different, but they seem to have kind of taken, parts from the Gen 1 car that I thought looked really good, and using the kind of Gen 3 as a base has kind of taken the best of both worlds. And I think that's really important for Formula E as they kind of settle on a visual identity for the cars, which I think, you know, that's something they definitely want to check that box.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, I think that's definitely got to be kind of key number one as they go and continue to adapt into the Gen 4 era. And if they ever go to a Gen 5, which I would assume is probably going to happen as long as the series is still able to be viable and still something that could still kind of withstand up to a Gen 5 era. So I think I completely agree. I think visually they have to be able to hammer down an identity and keep that identity to be able to allow fans to kind of learn about the car, be able to kind of adapt to the car and be able to understand it to a point where fans can say, they can understand how the car performs at different tracks and at different circuits and it just in the series as a whole. And I think in terms of brand recognition, it also makes it easier as well for the fan to be able to understand, like, okay, this is a Formula E car, this is a F1 car, like, having multiple changes yearly can be challenging for a brand new fan, especially in a brand new series where they have made already four changes, technically speaking, with the Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, and now the Gen 3 Evo. So it is going to be interesting to see how Formula E continues to try to hopefully hammer down their brand recognition in terms of the visual aesthetical look of the car. So I completely agree with that. Um, and yeah, I mean, just looking back on the weekend, you mentioned Taylor Barnard had a great run. He played it perfectly the way, I mean, everybody thought at that point in the race where he was coming out of the red flag. He had the energy saved up because of him taking the drive-through penalty. He had to take it because of the overpower, which is something I imagine we'll probably talk about in tonight's show. Um, and he played it. He played his cards right. I mean, he got lucky at a right time in a right situation where there was a lot of chaos that had happened by the point that he came in out of the red flag, that final red flag stoppage, and he was in the right place at the right time, had his teammate behind him, and took his attack modes wisely, and it was exciting to see. So I mean, good for Taylor Barnard in his third race, becomes the youngest driver to ever score a podium in Formula E, and we'll see where he goes from there. I mean, I do think McLaren was definitely behind the eight ball in terms of their power and performance this weekend. I mean, they were towards the back of the grid for most of the race until they got towards the tail end, where teams were starting to you're starting to see drivers, unfortunately, having to leave the grid, if you will, for to basically DNFs, if you will, for the weekend for the race. So McLaren kind of got lucky in this situation, but I do think that there is potential for them to be a pretty solid tandem within Formula E. I don't know if they're a top team right now, but I definitely think they're a mid-tier team at this point, based off of what I saw.
I would totally agree, and I think you said it very well. Where I think that's a very good driver lineup, maybe one of the strongest on the grids. But and that's part of why they got so far. It was cool to hear Sam Bird's radio and how he was definitely trying to play support to Taylor, and he literally said on the radio at one point, "I think Taylor can win this. He just needs to go right now." In that last kind of 5 laps. But at the same time, you could also see that they were struggling to keep up with the Jaguars and the Porsches, especially on straight line speed. So definitely cool driver ability, but the car, I agree with you, is definitely more in the midfield at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, good showing by him. Dan Ticktum also grabbing a ninth place performance, which is pretty impressive for a team that nobody really knew what to expect, really, in terms of what their performance was going to be, given that they were a team that kind of came out of the blue, announced their driver lineups late. Like we had no, I mean, we assumed Ticktum and Beckman were probably going to be the two guys who were going to be fielding the cars or driving the cars this year for Kiro Race or Kiro Cupra, whatever their team name is now called. But impressive performance for them in their first race. They get points, which is something that ERT wasn't able to really do a lot last year. And I think that performance wise, there is somewhat some expectations from them. Zane Maloney as well had a nice strong run. He got all the way up to fifth. I mean, that's a positive look for Apt Lola. But in all this includes the attack mode, right? And attack mode really benefited almost everybody at some point during the race in terms of moving up on the grid. And it also played a huge factor in drive-through penalties and guys who are overpowering in the car. We were talking about this earlier, me and you, privately, if you will, about what that is going to look like as the season progresses, and where is kind of that. I think the best way to use it is where is how tempted our driver is going to be to try to push the limit, if you will, in terms of attack mode with the all-wheel drive and getting to the point where, okay, we don't want to overpower to the point where we're going to get a penalty, but we also don't want to underuse our attack mode in the process. So how do you feel like drivers are going to be able to balance that out this season? Because I think that is going to be a fascinating thing, especially as we get to different tracks where attack mode is going to be situated in different areas. Like Miami, we have no idea where that's going to be. And I think there's a lot of learning pieces that's going to be playing out early in the season with attack mode that is going to make things kind of fascinating to keep an eye on. And I think could really change the race, if you will.
Absolutely. I mean, and I could see eventually maybe the teams might want a little more clarification on that from the
Mm-hmm.
FIA or maybe some regulation, something. Because certainly I would say the last thing Formula E really needs right now is something like that where there's kind of crazy penalties every race, which we kind of saw with this one. Or definitely you would hate that, someone loses a win and it comes down to that like right at the end and
I
it
mean,
kind of just
Normanado had the lead and lost his lead because of an overpower penalty.
exactly.
And Nissan ran very strong this weekend. I mean, in terms of your top four, I mean, you have Nissan, Jaguar, Porsche, and Mahindra, not in that order, but I mean, those are right now your top four teams, if you will, right now in terms of performance. I mean, those are the teams right now that look to be the strongest so far on the grid.
Absolutely. I am glad to see that the field is as close as it looked like it would be in testing. I think that is a very strong thing for Formula E this season. And once the attack modes started coming, it was genuinely insane to see the sidebar. Just nothing is staying. No one is maintaining a position. It's just constant up and down. So absolutely. I mean, when you have one of those trains going, there's really not many series where you can see that kind of movement happening just at any
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, and again, just looking back at the race, I mean, there was a time where I believe like half the field had taken attack mode, which is wild. And I think, as you mentioned, I think this is the most effective that attack mode has ever been, and I'm very impressed with how Formula E has been able to kind of find the perfect combination with using the all-wheel drive and incorporating it with the attack mode and the as you mentioned, the effectiveness that it has now within the series. Because prior to this, it was more so just kind of a gimmick, if you will, a marketing ploy by Formula E, just saying, "Hey, we got attack mode. It's kind of neat. It's it's kind of an extra power boost, but we never really have been able to kind of like figure that out in terms of like how to use it effectively. So, we're kind of just making it like, as you mentioned, their pit stops basically, and
Right.
and I think now that they got that effective um, kind of format for attack mode, I think it's going to be really fascinating to watch and see. And that was one of the big things. I was listening to Mitch Evans's roundtable this afternoon, actually, so he was able to have his roundtable here, and it was so fascinating to hear a bunch of questions he's getting asked about attack mode and how that's going to play out this season, and it really will be a big key in terms of a lot of these races and how they play out in terms of the finish. I really do believe that attack mode is going to be arguably maybe the key to a lot of race winners wins this year. I think that's probably going to be I mean, I don't know if you agree with that, Liam, but I think that's how it's going to play out this year.
Totally. Uh, and this race has already demonstrated that knowing when to use it and how to use it, you can
Yeah,
get 5 or 6 places. So if you time that right, that can be an extremely powerful thing, you know.
yeah,
And credit to Formula E too, I would say, and this goes back to like the finding of the identity, which I would say in the last 2 or 3 seasons, Formula E is I think really zeroing in on that, and credit to them in the sense that there were some things like you kind of said, kind of gimmicky when it started out that didn't didn't have the best look. Like getting rid of fan boost but keeping attack mode, I think was a really good call because attack mode maybe it is kind of a gimmick, but it is a really cool thing that no one else has. And now that we're finally getting to really see it as intended, and it is that cool and it is that powerful, I think that's a great thing for the series.
I completely agree. I mean, yeah, and fan boost was such a weird thing, like such a weird time for Formula E, and again, it's like in fan boost, it's such a popularity contest with that. It's like, I'm a big Pascal Verhelst fan, so we're all gonna vote Pat. Like, fan boost is just so skewed with the way that plays out that makes it way too. That's I don't know. It just it's it's a little corny in my opinion. And again, I love Formula E. I love a lot of what they do. They have consistently elevated themselves in terms of kind of defying technology and continuing to kind of be that first series to kind of knock off the checkbox, if you will. But with things like Fan Boost, where they're again trying to kind of create this gimmick, if you will, or trying to like add a gimmick to the racing. I mean, for us as racing fans, for us purist racing fans, want to see we want us to see good racing. We don't want to see things like that be involved where like a fan vote basically is allowing extra power to somebody's car. Like I just don't know. It's something that I don't want to see in a series. In my opinion, it's like MLB right now with the golden bat rule. It's something that I don't want to see in MLB. Same thing here with kind of Formula E. I don't want to see a fan boost. It's just not needed in a series.
No, I completely agree. We're here to see the sport, right? And that's the point of
Mm-hmm.
sportsmanship is seeing these people compete against each other. It's not just I like that person more, so he should go
Yeah,
faster. You know,
exactly. That's a video game thing.
I was
That's
gonna say
literally
that's
what
a
it
racing
is.
movie. You know
Yeah,
how at the end of every racing movie where they're like neck and neck, and the person
exactly,
just believes more, and then they go faster. You know, for a
exactly,
second there, Formula E did kind of have that. So
exactly.
definitely, it's cool in the movies. Don't need it in real racing.
let's kind of go back again from the weekend. For one, Mitch Evans obviously winning the race. Jaguar looked really strong all weekend. Although Mitch Evans dealt with a lot of problems, had stoppages at times during qualifying and during his practices. Jaguars seem to have some sort of issue in terms of their power. I'm not exactly sure with electrical. Because obviously Frines had the problem. Evans had the issue, and we even saw multiple other teams have issues as well. Lucas Degrassi was stopped on track. Jake Dennis had the red light that came on, which was like shocking because we don't see that very often. And that was what came with the first red flag stoppage of the race was the red light on Dennis's car. For people who are unaware with any of the electrical components in the car, if a red light is on, you are not actually able to physically touch it. It means that the car is deemed unsafe. So there is a certain protocol and procedure that these marshals have to go through to be able to actually basically bring the car back to the paddock. And that's kind of what Formula E had to do. And I think they made the right call. I mean, they definitely made the right call. And I think a lot of teams and drivers were kind of confused of why the actual red flag came out at first, but once I think we figured out why, it made a lot of sense. Um, and then obviously, I mean, the big incident of the weekend was the Pascal Verhelst flip, and I think we got to talk about that. Pascal flipping on his side, getting in contact basically with Nick Cassidy. They kind of ran out of room as they were going into one of the turns. I'm not exactly sure what turn it was. Um, ran out of room. Cassidy kind of clipped him a little bit. Nothing against Cassidy. He really couldn't do anything. He was just getting squeezed in. Basically, he kind of had to find his way to make it into the turn cleanly. Unfortunately, Verline hits the wall very hard. Actually, hits the catch fence very hard, and then basically scrapes down that straightaway there on the turn. And scary incident. Fortunately, Pascal Verline able to come out of the car okay. And I mean, Liam, we've obviously seen many Formula E races in our lifetime. It's the series has only been around for 10 years. There's only been maybe one or two flips that I can recall. It's very uncommon we see these cars flip. I mean, the reaction we had for that was kind of shocking. Uh, like it was wild at the same time. We were just I could not believe it. I mean, we saw something happen in the background. They didn't really show a good visual angle when it happened, but just seeing that in real time, it was like, oh my god, Pascal just flipped. It was wild.
You had to do a double take. Like it didn't
Yeah, it
even
was
look
crazy.
real because it didn't seem like they even had the momentum to do that,
No,
and especially the way it was on the camera, it was just kind of in the corner of your eye, and you're like, that really just happened.
yeah,
It
and what
looked
a
fake. It looked like a stunt in a movie or something. It didn't even look real.
and what a shame too, especially for how strong Pascal was performing the weekend. I mean, Porsche Jaguar seemed to be two of the strongest teams on the weekend in terms of just non-attack mode pace, if you will. I think those two teams really were able to kind of figure things out during the race relatively quickly. Nissan looked really strong as well, as we mentioned, and Mahindra had a really great race as well. Fifth and sixth place for Mortara and Nick DeVries, which is very, very impressive. But I mean, again, the Pascal incident. I mean, one of the most wildest incidents I've seen. I mean, it was up there with the Cadillac incident I saw earlier this year at Sebring, where Pipo Derani flipped on his roof. I mean, I've seen flips before. I was at the Ryan Preece flip last year. I've only been covering motorsports for 2 years, and I've seen probably 4 or 5 different flips happening within NASCAR, Formula E, and any of these series. It's pretty wild, but that was a nasty hit, and fortunately Pascal is okay. But I mean, what a shame for Pascal to have his race end like that. But I mean,
And
just
for
so happy
Cassidy
that he's
too.
okay.
Cassidy was having a pretty good race as well, and as you said, wasn't really anyone's fault. And I do think they might actually take a look at the design of the car in that sense, because what happened definitely was Cassidy's front kind of got wedged under the middle part of
Yeah,
Pascal's car, and the way that the Gen 3 Evo is, there is a wedge kind of body, work shape there. And yeah, you don't want that to happen. And the whole point that the rear wheels even have that kind of body work there, so someone
Yeah.
doesn't flip and that doesn't make contact. So I wouldn't even be surprised if maybe before Mexico they do something and shape that maybe a little different, because you definitely don't want to see that happening.
No, no, it's yeah, it was definitely a wild scene, and obviously red flagged that after or red flagged the race after the incident, which made total sense. Again, it's a testament though to Formula E in terms of the durability of the car because it didn't look like the car got damaged much at all when you saw it flipped. And it's a testament for the safety standards that this series has. I mean, for Pascal to walk away okay pretty much and nothing really major ended up happening, it's a testament to what Formula E is, and obviously it's a great thing to see him um, okay, and hopefully he'll be back. Obviously, he'll be back hopefully for Mexico City, and then we'll see him hopefully there then. It was pretty wild, and it's funny. I sent you a video about it about his incident that happened in Monaco. I mean, it was almost practically an identical incident that happened in Monaco, where Jensen Button kind of clipped him and he actually ended up kind of on his side. So it was again a wild scene and something that I think many of us will never forget. And probably one of the in the 11 years that Formula E has been around, it's definitely was something that will be replayed a lot over the years.
Yeah, it's going on the highlight reel for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think with that, I mean, where do you put this race at in terms of all time races? I mean, this was a wild first race for the Gen 3 Evo, and I think there was a lot of it was a crazy race to say the least. I mean, there was so much going on between the addition of the kind of updated attack mode to the incident that happened with Pascal to I mean just so much chaos if you will happening in this opening race. I mean, where do you put it in terms of just kind of Formula E lore, if you will, and what this series is? I mean, again, only been around for 11 years, and was probably one of the more wilder races of the series' history.
Well, I think it all depends what comes after. I think this is a kind of legendary debut for this car. I think that is pretty. It is pretty fun in a way. I'm almost glad that they're having this race kind of early on before the rest of the season kicks in
Yep,
January. Like, because clearly they need to work out some things. I'll say if it keeps being like this, then this race will look a little less impressive to me in
I
that
agree.
sense. Where you would hope that they do work some of these things out, but if it does kind of get better from here, then what a way to start the season.
Yeah,
Simple as that.
I completely agree. Again, what a way to start the year. I mean, really, really wild stuff. Um, and we'll see. We'll see when we head to Mexico City again. That's an F1 circuit. I think that's gonna be a race that there will be a lot of eyes on. Pato Award is obviously supposed to be attending that race, and I'm assuming he will be probably running a Formula E car at some point in some demonstration. Um, and it's going to be interesting to see if this style of racing is going to continue. I mean, obviously, again, Mexico City is a much more difficult track. Sao Paulo is a much more free flowing circuit. There's really only that one turn, that kind of hard, sharp, almost 90-degree turn that's a little bit challenging. But I mean, for the most part, that circuit is relatively flowing in terms of the circuit that it is. So Mexico City is going to be obviously different. It's going to be much more technical, and it's going to be interesting to see how the attack mode plays out and how a lot of the other components of what this new car has to offer is going to play out for Mexico City in January. So can't come soon enough, man. It's gonna be exciting, and obviously Mitch Evans coming in with the series lead, and well deserved again, coming from the back all the way to the front, which is wild. Testament to Mitch Evans, and what a great start to the year. I mean, talk about confidence boost heading into Mexico City. That's a huge way to start out the season.
Absolutely, and it's good also to see that some of the kind of tribulations he had towards the end of last season hasn't hurt his confidence too much. Clearly,
Even the
he's
tribulations he had this weekend.
and tribulations this weekend. Absolutely, he's definitely a very resilient driver. So very interesting to see where he goes from here.
Yeah, very well spoken. Really big fan of this type of racing and Formula E and as a whole. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does at Mexico City. Again, there's a lot. I think there's a lot of teams this year that are going to be gunning for that championship. I think it's going to be much more open than it's ever been, which is awesome and a testament to Formula E in terms of trying to keep that parity within the series. And I think that's very greatly important. So a lot of excitement as we go to Mexico City. But let's run into some Formula E talk, or Formula One talk, I should say, from one Formula Series to another Formula Series. Formula One, the finale this weekend at Abu Dhabi. We'll briefly touch on this. I'll be honest, I didn't get a chance to really watch much of the Formula One race. Unfortunately, it was too early on my time. Sonny Hayes got the win. I'm just kidding. But if anybody saw Sonny Hayes winning in the F1 movie. They filmed the what I would assume would be the final scene. I loved how there was a place Twitter account called Motorsports Quotes posted that the team went bankrupt 2 days after Sonny Hayes won the race, and I'm like, no, I'm like Apex is gone. They're leaving the series. What a shame, but nevertheless, McLaren able to get the job done, winning the constructors title. This is obviously a big deal for Formula One. Red Bull has kind of been the standard the last couple of years. And now, as we kind of go into this new era of Formula One, where we're seeing new powertrains, we're seeing new teams kind of coming into the groove with a team like Cadillac. This is a huge stepping stone in terms of opening up the series for teams to kind of gun down Red Bull. Red Bull is no longer the top team anymore. It's becoming a little bit of a wider open field, and I'm excited to see what 2025 is going to have to offer for the Formula One season.
Absolutely. I think there is a sense of, I don't want to say relief, but maybe a little bit, where there definitely was a moment where I was definitely a little afraid that, oh, we are just in these cycles of like, all right, 7 years of dominance or whatever. And it was still 4 years, but at the end of the day, this season did feel like a real competition.
Yep.
And certainly there is now this feeling of just excitement and hope that next year is going to be a much more wide open, and who knows what's going to happen with the new cars in 2026.
Yeah, it's gonna be wild, man. It's gonna be really wild, and it's awesome. It's awesome to see how Formula One and we talked about this earlier between me and you. I mean, to see where Formula One begun the year at, right? Where it was like, it's gonna be the same old story. Red Bull's gonna run the table this year, like we always do, or like they always do. And then for the big win for Lando at Miami, turning kind of this season around and making it as open as it was. I mean, it really that Miami race really was the turning point of making this season what it was, which was 5 or 6 different winners and obviously a couple driver team changes, if you will. I mean, it was definitely an exciting year, and 2025 is just around the corner. We got Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari. We have obviously multiple driver changes coming up. A lot of new faces we're going to get to see. I think it's going to be a really exciting year for Formula One, and I think I can't wait. I mean, it might be really the first full year that I'm truly going to be really invested with Formula One. Listen, I love Formula One. I think it's a great series. I think it's the pinnacle of racing. If you could get to Formula One, then go race in Formula One because it is the pinnacle in terms of the global attention that it garners. But I think 2025 may be the most intriguing racing year in terms of watching the series because as much as I love Formula One and the racing, it's been known to be a media sport. It's been known to be a celebrity, a marketing motorsport, if you will. Going into 2025, it really does feel like the racing is going to pick up a lot next year, and I cannot wait for that.
No, me neither. I definitely hope that 2026 doesn't reset it again. Like, there's kind of a fear in me where I'm like, oh, the teams are finally kind of catching up to each other. That'd suck if we get a new car right after that to kind of put someone on top again. But who knows? I'll definitely say that considering that Max still won the championship, that was pretty much as cool of a season as we could have gotten, where we still get that outcome. Where like no one's even
Absolutely.
really that mad about it, but we're just
Absolutely.
happy that it was as exciting as it was. So
Exactly. It's yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun to see 2025, and I'm looking forward to it. And kind of going from F1 to a former F1 driver as we get into kind of our weekly news roundup, if you will. A lot of news coming out today and throughout this week, but let's begin with kind of the top headline: Kevin Magnussen obviously joining up with BMW. He announced last week that he will be running for BMW next season in WEC full time next year. But not only will he be running in WEC, he also made his announcement as well that he will be running for Team RLL, which is Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, in the Rolex 24 next season. So a big F1 star, well, I guess now a former F1 star, but a guy who's been in the F1 paddock for a long time, somebody who's no stranger to sports car racing. Obviously, his father, a very well respected race car driver in his own right, John Magnussen as well. Um, I'm excited. Kevin Magnussen in the paddock for the Rolex 24. That's going to definitely bring a lot of eyes to the racing next year, and to have somebody of his caliber. I know maybe it didn't always turn out the best when he was at Haas, but I mean he is definitely a solid driver, and he can hold his own in a sports car. So I'm very much excited. I'm very excited to see how Kevin Magnussen is going to fare next year in the Rolex 24 in the BMW with RLL. It should be a lot of fun.
absolutely, I think he's a great fit for IMSA, and he has raced. When he was out of F1, he did do some sports car racing, right?
Yeah, he did. He actually won a sports car race with Chip Ganassi Cadillac back at Detroit in 2021. So he's a guy who's no stranger to the IMSA paddock. He's actually raced a full season of IMSA that year. And yeah, it's going to be very exciting to see Kevin Magnussen, back in the IMSA paddock, hopefully battling for the Rolex 24 crown. BMW struggled at the Rolex 24, so I don't know where BMW is going to be in terms of their pace, but there is definitely a lot of excitement surrounding the team, and surrounding Kevin joining this program for 2025, at least for the Rolex 24, and maybe there will be other opportunities for him to race sports cars. I mean, obviously he's going to do his WEC stuff, but hey, if he can come back to the IMSA paddock, it'll be awesome to see him again, hopefully for other races. So having a name like Kevin Magnussen within the series just solidifies IMSA being one of those premier series, and I think that's going to be a huge get to have him there at the Rolex 24 weekend, one of the most historic races of the year, of the racing calendar, if I should say, if you will.
Yeah, totally. A lot of moves in sports cars the last couple of weeks.
It's been wild, and a lot more to get into here tonight. We'll mention a couple other news. AO Racing announces their LMP2 lineup for the upcoming 2025 season. Dane Cameron is going to be running full time. The Porsche GTP champion, Dane Cameron, will be joining team owner, team principal, if you will, PJ Hyatt, or I should say co owner PJ Hyatt, with Johnny Edgar, and Christian Rasmussen is also going to be a part of that lineup as well. Liam, this is a pretty exciting lineup. Dane Cameron is obviously one of the top level sports car drivers. PJ Hyatt has continually been growing AO Racing with Spike, the LMP2 car, and obviously Rexy, which is the awesome green dinosaur livery, the Porsche liveried cars. So, you know, overall, what do you think about this lineup? It's a pretty exciting group for AO Racing heading into next season. With, I mean, Dane Cameron is one of the top sports car drivers in the world, and then PJ Hyde, who definitely has been able to kind of grow himself as a driver within IMSA. So, what are kind of your thoughts for this lineup heading into next year?
My thoughts are, you know way more about it than me, but it sounds pretty cool to me.
Christian Rasmussen at least.
I do. Yep. So I'm happy for him. Sounds cool. I can't wait to.
Listen, they are what AO Racing is doing though, having the liveries like the dinosaur livery, the dragon livery, and being able to kind of like promote it out more to kids. They have a Hot Wheel for the Porsche Rexy car. to have the promotional part of their team involved with IMSA and to promote the series to a younger audience, I can't appreciate that more enough than what they're doing. Again, I think that is a huge thing because that's a big thing, man, is trying to get these kids involved more into racing. And it can be challenging because it's not a career path that's looked at as a plausible career path, if you will, by many because of the amount of resources that you need, the money now that you have to race in these series. I mean, it truly is a different world in racing than it's ever been nowadays. But to be able to have a team that entices kids, that kind of caters to a younger audience with their liveries, with their designs, with their kind of overall marketing, plan that they have, if you will, I can't respect that enough because that's the only way we're going to be able to get younger fans into motorsports. And obviously, me, being at the track, it is a thrill. It is an adrenaline rush, and any way you can entice the younger audience to get into motorsports, like something like this, I think that's a big thing.
Couldn't agree with you more. I love to see it in all the racing series. I love to see the Lego. I love that there's a whole Lego F1 series now. I love all that stuff.
Yep.
And look, even I get excited when I'm in the supermarket and there's Hot Wheels at checkout, and I see a hypercar, or I see a Formula E car, I see an F1 car. That makes me excited a little bit.
Yeah.
Just that it's out there, and that that's something that young people still care about. Because even when I was a kid, I didn't really know that much about real racing. I still had the Ferrari, the
Yeah.
'60s Le Mans cars and stuff like that. So I think it's so important.
I mean, growing up, I remember having all the little NASCAR diecast. I mean, that's how people, you always raced around the little NASCAR. You build a little track and stuff. Or like, I would always have the Monster Jam trucks, like I'm wearing my Monster Jam hat and stuff. So it's like any way you could get that younger fan to be involved or be kind of connected with the motorsports world is a plus for me. So listen, AO Racing's doing great things, and I mean they had a great year last year. They won the GTD Pro title, kind of a team that wasn't a factory team. They were kind of running their own independently run organization and program. So I can't respect them enough for what they've been able to do, and it's impressive. Um, Heart of Racing announces their Rolex 24 lineup as well. They will be running a GTD car, which was already expected. They were going to run a GTD car this year, but they will also have a GTD Pro car that will feature Alex Riberas and Roman DeAngelis. Both of those drivers will be running the brand new Aston Martin Valkyrie in WEX. So this will kind of be a precursor, if you will, before the Valkyrie will debut, which will happen at Sebring in IMSA, and then obviously in WEC, it'll be at Qatar to open up the season. But two-car lineup there for Heart of Racing. And Liam, that's a team that's honestly or that's a team that is right now currently expanding, and there's a lot of things exciting going on within that program, especially now with their new Valkyrie that's came out.
Yeah, really cool. I love that Aston Martin. I think that's such a gorgeous race car. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good looking car. And then more news, obviously more driver news. Pipo Durrani, who had tested at Daytona, he will be joining DXT Racing, which is the team that recently just announced that Robert Wickens will be racing with this year. People will be running in the Rolex 24 with DXDT as he begins his journey going into the new Genesis venture. People was one of the drivers that was announced last week as being one of the two to kind of be the initial Genesis drivers for next year in WEC. Obviously, really exciting news with that. But people will run the Rolex 24 with DXTT, owned by Brian Sellers. So it'll be exciting to see people in a GTD car. He's had so much success in GTP racing, so it should be a lot of fun to see him in that there as well. One news piece I forgot to mention, and this was a big news story that came out a couple days ago. The Ford Mustang GT. I don't know if you got a chance to see this, Liam, but the Ford Mustang GT became the first American manufacturer to run a sub 7 time at Nürburgring. which is very impressive. I don't know if you have any thoughts about this, but
Well, I
to
hadn't heard
see,
about that, but that is
yeah,
really cool. I am a bit of a Nürburgring nerd, and I actually was not aware that an American car had not done that before. But I think
they said
that's
they're the
very
first.
cool.
Yeah, they said they're the first American brand to run a sub 7 at Nürburgring. Um, I mean, how big of a leap is that, especially for this car debuting last year in IMSA and WEC, to go to a track that's a very difficult track, like very, very challenging. Like it's arguably one of the hardest tracks to race at, if you're a race car driver. To go to a track and put it down a sub 7 time, how much does that kind of say about the future of that Ford Mustang and kind of what's to come for that car?
It means that they're serious about it, and they're trying to show off where it matters because that
Yeah,
is such a, especially in European racing, showing off what your car can do at the Nurburgring turns a lot of heads. And so I think symbolically, in a practical sense, it's a big step. I think symbolically it means a lot as well.
I agree. I completely agree. Other news that came out today: the World Motorsport Council for the FIA had their annual meeting, basically going over kind of future regulations and kind of future plans for different series within the FIA's world. Obviously, the FIA controls many series, including Formula E, including Formula One, but they also control WEC. They control many other racing disciplines throughout the world, whether that be in North America all the way out into Europe and Asia and Australia. So a lot of news coming out within FIA today with their council meeting. A couple major news stories. World Rally Championship is receiving some major regulation changes coming into 2027. The plan is to make it cheaper, more flexible, and allow for more competition. There will be more of an allowance for the bodywork design, so they'll be allowing for manufacturers to run SUVs, saloons, or hatchbacks, or bespoke designs, which is yet to be unveiled. There will be a 345,000 uh, dollar pound max cost cap, if you will. And then there is a potential. This is kind of interesting for World Rally Cross and World Rally Championship to have crossover, which will allow for teams to run cars in both categories. There also is a new point system for WRC heading into I believe next season as well. So a couple pretty major changes there. I like the crossover to be able to kind of merge two series together. We're seeing that a lot now in FIA, and even with FIA and IMSA with the WEC and IMSA series kind of merging together and allowing for GTP racing and hypercar racing to kind of go together. I like to see these series kind of joining forces because that's how the sustainability of these series is going to be able to last for so long is to be able to allow for that crossover. And I think more series need to recognize that, or more series that can allow for crossover need to recognize that that is a big way of being able to sustain a series and its longevity.
Absolutely, and make it easier for fans too to get into it.
I agree.
Um, I think, especially with sports cars, I think that has gone a really long way to simplify kind of getting into it. I mean, sports cars are already very complicated, but that is a really cool thing that they have that compatibility now.
Absolutely. Yeah, big stuff there from the World Rally Championship. Other stuff coming out today as well. The FIA also confirmed the 2025 schedules for the European Drag Racing Championship, the European Historic Rally Championship, the European Truck Racing Championship, which I love, by the way. I don't know if you've ever gotten a chance to see that, Liam, but it is so much fun. One of my favorite series to actually keep an eye on. The Kumo TCR World Cup, which is actually a fun series to watch as well. I really enjoy their racing. The African Rally Championship, the Kodasur Rally Championship, the NACAM Rally Championship, and the European Rally Trophy all had their schedules confirmed by the FIA today for 2025. So you can all check that out on the FIA's website. And there was some other news that also kind of hit home with us today, Liam. This was actually, and we could probably get into a little bit of this. Obviously, we're running short here on time here as we close out the show, or approaching the closing here of the show. But the FIA announced their involvement with Xtreme H, which is obviously Alejandro Agag's kind of baby, if you will, one of his three ventures that he has in terms of electrical racing. Although this is going to be hydrogen racing, it used to be Xtreme E, now going to Xtreme H. It is now going to be the FIA Xtreme H World Cup. So FIA will be under the kind of it'll be the main group that will be kind of running things for the Xtreme H stuff, but obviously Alejandro will have a big play in that series. I'm so excited, man. This is great news, and it's another series that Alejandro has that's under the FIA umbrella. It's two of his three series under the FIA family, which is a really big deal, and it shows FIA's commitment to sustainability in terms of environmentally, I should say. And this is a really big deal. This is exciting to see, and obviously I'm looking forward to seeing how Xtreme H is going to play out with this new hydrogen systems, because it's unprecedented. We've never had a hydrogen series, so this is going to be a really big deal.
Totally. I mean, first I'd say, what a busy guy. I don't know how he finds time this day to do all the stuff he does. And when we met him, he's also just very calm,
Very calm.
very, very calm man. Very, very just straight to business. Very nice though. I think it's really cool. I think it does make a lot of sense to branch out, because Formula E is already doing all right, how far can we push the electric stuff? I think there is definitely room for some other, innovation. So I think the hydrogen is very cool. It doesn't seem like too much is going to change. That much will change about the series, in the sense that it will still be Spark making the cars.
Yeah.
It'll still have
Yeah.
similar lineups. It'll still have the male and female team members. So all that will pretty much be the same. But again, nothing wrong. Innovation is always good. You always want to see the cutting edge.
And it's great to see the teams that are involved too, like Andretti, Legacy Motor Club's involved. People don't realize that. Legacy Motor Club, who races in NASCAR, Jimmy Johnson, Richard Petty, they're in this series, and that's a big deal. And again, the involvement in the series, I'm excited to see who is willing to come and be a part of this kind of first year. And maybe this will become a trickle-down effect, because obviously we know that WEC wants to become and have a hydrogen class. We know that that's in the future plans, and we know other series maybe are looking towards a hydrogen based series, or a hydrogen based style of racing. So I'm intrigued to see where this goes. I mean, heck, maybe we'll see a hydrogen based rally series. Like, there was just so much that could come out of this, that FIA having a hold down on this Xtreme H World Cup is a big deal. And again, it shows maybe where FIA wants to bring some of the resources to. So I'm excited to see how this trickle-down effect plays out as we kind of get going with this new hydrogen format now that's coming to Xtreme H.
Do you think hydrogen will get a junior series before Formula E does, or what? Maybe that's a mean question.
And no, but it's a valid question though, because hydrogen is really becoming something that people are intrigued about. It is becoming that new baby, that new toy, if you will, right? Like electric. It's something that we're kind of getting to, I would say, the peak of development, and right now I think it's continuing to grow. But hydrogen is becoming that thing where it's like an untapped resource, and I think it's a market that, if you can be able to kind of advance the technology within hydrogen, you may be looked at as kind of like one of the more like most genius people within motorsports. And I think that's something that it's great that Alejandro is trying to get that in now, because if he's able to do that, he is going to be looked at as one of the more technologically I don't know, geniuses in terms of racing, and I'm excited to see that hopefully play out. I'm really looking forward to that.
That's a great point. Totally.
Other news coming out from FIA's meeting: multiple changes coming to F1. They're going to be introducing a cooling kit for certain extreme condition races, which I think is a pretty big deal, because Obviously, there are a lot of races, especially in certain parts of the country and of the world, that don't always bring the best of weather to these F1 races. So I think having the cooling kit is going to be a huge factor, especially for some of these hot races like, say, in Miami, where it's like 95 degrees in the month of May. And I think that's going to be really big to have a cooling kit. And obviously looking forward to seeing how that will play out. And there were the other news that was announced by F1 in terms of their also sustainability initiatives that they're hoping to implement here in the coming years. So some news there. Again, you could all read that on the FIA's website. They have all the information for you there. And then kind of final news here for FIA news is that they decided on allowing attack mode prior to the pit boost rather than barring it before the stop, which I think is a very interesting thing that's being implemented now for the Formula E season. Liam, I know we talked about this briefly, but what are your thoughts about them now allowing attack mode prior to that pit boost, which is basically the pit stop for Formula E now that's coming into the series on doubleheader weekends? What are your thoughts on now allowing a little bit more of an open strategy compared to what they had before?
I just can't wait to see it happening on track. I think it opens up so many more strategic possibilities. And I think it's going to make Formula E kind of like a new sport. I think it's going to really change the dynamic of all of that. And it's going to be really cool to see who adapts and who doesn't, right?
Yep. No, I completely agree. It's going to be a very exciting thing to see. I think, obviously, excuse me, I think there is a lot of um, kind of intrigue of how this whole pit boost is going to play out. And it's going to be fascinating to see, like, when is that optimal time to take your pit boost, because the race director actually, I don't know if anybody saw on Formula E's broadcast, but they actually gave you like race director notes of like when the best time was to use attack mode. And I thought that was so fascinating. Like, I didn't even know that was a part of the broadcast until I watched it. And I'm like, that is such a genius idea for people to kind of understand, like, how these circuits play out in terms of strategy and like when that timing is best. And I think that is going to make things really interesting in terms of these upcoming races. Like, I'm super excited to see how that strategy is going to play out when we get to Saudi Arabia. And then, I'm really, really fascinated with a lot of what that pit boost is going to bring to the table. And it's unfortunate I won't get to see it in Miami, because that would have been awesome if they had a doubleheader in Miami and that was going to be implemented. I think it would have been awesome. Um, Hopefully next year, maybe they'll have a doubleheader next year, but I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how that affects the strategy, especially once we get out of the Mexico City weekend. You only have two non-doubleheader weekends, so pit boost is going to be something we're going to get to learn very quickly.
Is there a specific reason that they've said that they don't want to do it at single races, or
I think it's an energy thing with it being a doubleheader weekend and how much energy is being exerted. I think the pit boost is looked at as more of like a, I don't know. I
I wonder
I
if it has
kind
to
of
do
get
with
where
their
they're coming
carbon
from.
net zero slate? I wonder if it would literally be, like you said, like
Maybe,
who
maybe
knows?
I don't know. It's gonna be interesting. I'm excited to see how it plays out. But to kind of close things out, IMSA also released a regulation change as well today. They actually sent me a ton of emails today. I got a ton of IMSA emails about regulation changes, but this was kind of the one that kind of hit my eye, and I thought this was an interesting regulation change. Um, the regulation is that cars that pit and rejoin during the prototype GT category and GTP GTD Pro class splits may overtake cars not in their class and pack up at the back of the pack of their respective class, but only prior to the conclusion of the GTP GTD Pro class split. The conclusion of the GTP and GTD Pro class split is considered concluded when the safety car lights are turned off and as each car in the field reaches the point on the track designated by the race director, after which point overtaking is prohibited until the green flag is displayed for the restart. Alternatively, the class split may can be concluded or as instructed by race control if necessary. So this is kind of an intriguing thing, right? Like, a couple of years, I believe it was last year, 2023, there was an Indianapolis situation that happened, class split. It was kind of interesting with the overtaking procedure and how that played out. It actually really kind of affected the race a little bit, but Um, I don't know. It's kind of interesting stuff coming from Insa here on the overtaking strategy. Liam, I don't know if you have any uh, comments at all with this, but it is going to be interesting to see how the class split is going to shake out. I think we're going to be able to see that playing out a lot more and seeing how teams and drivers react to it in situations. I'm looking forward to seeing how that will play out at the Rolex 24. I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Uh, if I'm there at Daytona, I just another note to take down. And
I like it. I like it. Bring in the stuff tonight, Liam, my friend. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Nevertheless, let's close out on this, Liam. Weekend slate, as we mentioned, pretty light. The Gulf 12 hours race in Abu Dhabi is happening this weekend. Actually, if you had an F1 ticket, you can get to this race for free. So if you're in the area and you have an F1 ticket, you can actually come to the Gulf 12 hour, which is actually not a bad marketing thing if you're the Gulf 12 hours. So hopefully there will be a
for
nice
sure.
crowd on hand for the kind of one of the final races of the 2024 calendar. But um, should be a
If
fun
anyone
race.
listening is still in their yacht in the marina right now,
Yeah, there you go.
don't sail out yet. Wait a minute.
Should be a fun race. Jules Gounon is kind of one of the highlights. Frederick Schandorf is also on the list as well. There's a couple other reasonably big names. David Ragon is also on there as well. He's raced in IMSA before, so there is some pretty solid names on the entry list as we come into this weekend's 12-hour race. So tune in. It's going to be on the YouTube channel for the Gulf 12-hour event. They actually have their own YouTube page, so you can watch all the racing coverage on there. And as for this show, this is the last show we are going to have before the end of this 2024 year. So we thought we'd close out on this, and I know we're a little over time here, but we have to do this. We're almost wrapping up 2024, Liam. As we approach 2024, what are some of your favorite racing moments from the calendar year? Maybe give me a top three. What are your top three, and I'll give mine.
Sure. I'll stick to ones that I saw live, either with my own eyes or live on a broadcast. So the first I would say was Sam Bird's overtake on the last lap of Sao Paulo earlier this year, which was probably my favorite overtake moment of racing. One of those moments that you live for as a racing fan, where it literally gets you to jump off the couch because it's just so exciting. The next thing I would definitely say would be Ryan Blaney's win in Martinsville, which I was also lucky enough to witness. Not just to witness, but to get to jump over the wall at Victory Lane and kind of experience the energy of that moment and just the vibes. And it was my first oval NASCAR race, which made it even more special. So that's definitely a racing moment from the season I will never forget for my whole life. And the last one, I will end on a sentimental note, since we're going to be taking this holiday break. For my last moment, I will choose watching Norman Nato, at least I think it was Norman Nato, spin out from the VIP club with you, Dylan, after we snuck up there to watch the first practice session in Portland for Formula E.
I like it. I like it. My top three, I guess I'll begin with number three. Going to Portland, man. Being with you in Portland, being at the race, getting to experience all that Formula E had to offer. One of my favorite racing experiences I've ever had, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to get to do that. To be able to be there at the track for those races, it was so much fun and had such a great time. Number two, a lot of good moments this year for number two. This is really challenging here for my pick. Um, Probably attending Sebring for the first time, being at the track, being able to be there um, to cover the race was one of the highlights of my year. And then number one has to be being at my first ever Daytona 500. What a wild scene that was! Getting to talk to DJ Khaled and getting a chance to see all the celebrities that were there. It was rather wild. I mean, the question that I asked DJ Khaled was, would he ever become a team owner? And then that answer ended up going viral on NASCAR's website. So, yeah, those I think will probably be my favorite moments. And being up close to seeing The Rock and seeing William Byron win the Daytona 500. I mean, that was just one of those races where growing up, I've watched so many Daytona 500s, and to be there in person and to cover the race and to be in victory lane after Byron won the race was pretty special. So those are probably my top three. So
Those are your three good ones.
So it was a wild year, man. 2024, and at the beginning of 2025, we're gonna be popping some champagne and getting ready for the new racing season. And man, there's gonna be a lot to get into come the new year. We got Supercross action kicking off at the beginning of the year. That's gonna be a lot of fun to cover this year for myself. We have other racing action coming up. We got the Rolex 24 a week after we do our first show back from our break that we're about to go on here. Again, lots of stuff coming up. 2025 is going to be wild. Hopefully, you guys will be able to join us. Again, if you're tuning in just now or if you're watching us post show, check us out on YouTube. All our episodes will be out on YouTube after they are live streamed here on No Filter Network. That is where we do all our live streams at. Can't thank No Filter Network enough for allowing us to use their platform to do our live streams. Obviously, if you want to help donate to our channel, help us out, help us get to these races. We can't do it without you. Tip us, donate to us, whatever you can whatever you can do to help us out, be able to give you the best content out there. We hope that you're able to do that. Also, check out the QR code up at the top of our screen. That'll go to all of our work that we do on Athlon Sports. So go check out all of our work. We got some really good interviews coming out here soon. So a lot of good stuff coming out. Liam, obviously, I'm ready, man. 2025, it's coming. I can't wait. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be freaking amazing. I'm so pumped. I've told this to you and many others. We got a great group at Auto Racing Digest. There's a lot of very talented individuals that are going to be working really hard this year and helping me out and being able to give content to you guys. And I think it's going to be a fascinating and a fantastic year here in 2025. I can't wait to do it with you and the rest of our team over at ARD. And man, it's going to be good. Rolex 24 can't come soon enough. And I mean, there's going to be so much racing to get into once the new year hits. It's going to be fun. Let's get rocking and rolling come 2025, buddy.
Absolutely, man. 2024 has been incredible. 2025 is going to be even better.
It's going to be amazing, man. It's going to be awesome. So for everybody, thank you so much. Hey, got to give a big shout out to our friends, City Garage Motorsports. Obviously, we are on the CGM number 85 Ford Fusion. Got to give our shout out to them. They always are big supporters of us. We're big supporters of them. Go check out all their work. They got some big stuff coming up. They got the ARCA test that week. Actually, that we come back, I'll be at the Architects test that Thursday and Friday at Daytona. So I'm going to be back to the track relatively quickly here coming up soon. But it's going to be a lot of fun. We got a lot of stuff planned and looking forward here to what's to come. So for myself, Dylan Spalding, for Liam Herbert, we say so long to 2024. We say so long to episode number 2. We'll see you guys in 2025. We'll hopefully have a glass of champagne to kind of honor the new year. And let's have some fun, man. It's going to be a lot of good times. So peace out, guys, and we'll see you on episode number 3 coming up.